on with our show. Our special guest today, and he really is very special, and I'll tell you why in a second. He's an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science at Indiana University, where he is also a member of the Data Science and Cognitive Science programs. He received his PhD in Computer Science and Engineering from The Ohio State University, a master's in Electrical Engineering from Drexel University in 2007, and his Bachelor of Electrical Engineering from the University of Delaware. He is a native of Wilmington. Prior to earning his PhD, he was on the engineering staff at Lockheed Martin, and he has received numerous research grants and awards, including a Toyota Research Institute Award, an IU Faculty Research Award, and 2 awards from the National Science Foundation, including the Career Grant, which is a huge achievement, a massive achievement for a junior faculty member, somebody who's early in their career. Why he is so special is also for his master's in 2007, he was actually the first graduate student to graduate from my lab, and he lived to talk about the process. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Donald Williamson. Take it away.
Well, good. I see the claps in the chat. Thank you for that. And thank you for the introduction, Dr. Kim. I'm glad to be here, giving a talk at Drexel, at least, virtually, because, Drexel was a place that I hold dear and very integral to my development as an engineer and, now an academic. So thank you for being here. Thank you for students for attending today's talk. So really for today, I want to talk about a few things. The title of my talk is, it says, Computer Speech and the Engineering Experience. So most of my talk today, I'm really mostly going to talk about some of my research, some of the work I do, and how it ties with real world experiences, how it ties with people. But I also want to at least start off my talk by encourage you all to sort of seek as many real world opportunities and experiences as you can. And I'll get into the details as I go through the talk, but I just really want to convey that message to you because it's definitely very important for you, especially as, this is ECE-101. I'm assuming most of you are freshmen or either an engineer or considering engineering as a career. So I definitely want to encourage you to seek opportunities with that. So really though, as Dr. Kim said, I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Computer Science, but my background is electrical engineering. As Dr. Kim said, my bachelor's and my master's degrees are both in electrical engineering. And, even to this day, I consider myself an engineer, where I have engineering experience both as in school and as an academic, but also in industry as an engineer for many years there. And, why am I excited about, giving this talk to you and talking about my experiences? And really, though, this is sort of like just some introductory stuff, is that I think that, by you deciding to be ECE students, like you're really choosing a great major. You're really choosing a great career path, not just a major, not just something to study. You're choosing a great career path. And I think that's true for many reasons. And for many reasons, I guess one reason is that one, it's a broad area. ECE is a very broad topic. You learn a lot of information. There's a lot of different fields of study you can get into. But also as an ECE major, you develop a lot of skills, many skills that could be helpful for you throughout your career. So in particular, like you may go on to take more signal processing courses, more courses in circuits, courses in communication, robotics, whatever it may be. And really, there's so many different areas of study within ECE, different paths you can take, as you navigate your career. And I think, one of the key parts of that is that as you learn these topics and take these courses, you're really going to develop a lot of skills, different skills that are transferable to you, not just, now as students, but later on in your career. And I can, speak firsthand to that as both working in academia and in industry. And really the skill that you really develop a lot is the ability to solve problems. Engineering, especially ECE students, you really learn to solve problems. That's what really engineering is about. You learn to solve real world problems, problems that people have been working on for decades that still don't have solutions. You learn how to solve these problems. You learn to take what steps are needed in order to get to a particular point. or particular solution. You learn things like programming. You learn things. You improve your math skills. You learn more things about physics and chemistry and all those sort of fields. You learn a lot of these skills from them that are transferable, including communication skills and stuff. Ability to write and speak. Um, but these are good things. These are good things, reasons to be an ECE. But really, though, I think that a real good reason to be an ECE is that there's a lot of opportunity within this field. There's a lot of opportunity within this field, both in industry and academia. And I definitely would encourage you to seek and look for as many opportunities as you can to get real world experience within this field, whether that's in academia, working with research advisors, different faculty members, whether that's in industry, working at different companies, big and small, here and abroad. Just getting as many real world experiences as you can, because there's a lot of opportunity. And sort of, why do I want you to do this? And why do I suggest that you get these real world experiences? Mainly this because my experience working in sort of out of coursework, not just not just taking classes, is there's so much that you learn through these real world experiences. You learn things that can't be taught in the classroom, not because they're not important, but mostly because there's really not enough time to teach them. And you'll learn things that are important and specific for your field that you can't cover in a your case here in quarter system, I assume, on a 10-week course. So I definitely encourage you to do those things. Like for me, for instance, for example, like I really learned how to test and debug code when I started to work. You get a sense of debugging and testing your own code if you're writing. Once you get that experience, if you haven't got it already, you'll get that experience, through your coursework. But you really don't really learn to debug code until you got in the real world and worked on real problems, and you had to look at someone's code that has thousands and thousands of lines. You kind of got to figure out what it's doing because the person who wrote it no longer is at the company. So those sort of experiences is something you can't really simulate in the classroom environment, but this is what you get once you get out to the real world, and either as researcher or as a sort of working in industry. So I definitely encourage you to get these experiences. But I think for other reasons, you learn some things you like and don't like, which is equally important because, at the end of the day, it's your career. You want to be satisfied with it. You just don't want a job. You want something you really enjoy. So get, these experiences just so you can learn what you like and don't like. I think also a big part of this, of real world experiences, is that you're going to work with people that are really experts in the field, that really know what they're doing. And in many cases, people that really want to help you. So I think in academia, we try to stimulate sort of team environments. You may do capstones later on in your studies. You may do design projects with other team members. But really, once you get into some industry and academic settings later on outside of class, you really get to know how to work with people and stuff like that. So just to sort of continue on with this, then I want to sort of get into some of my experiences, just my path, and then get into more or less some of my research as well for the rest of this talk. So what are some of my experiences at this point? Well, I've had many experiences. As Dr. Kim said, I'm from Delaware, born and raised. Spent the first 18 years of my life, or first 22 years of my life there, because I stayed in Delaware when I went to graduate for undergraduate at the University of Delaware. And I was exposed to my first sort of real world experience there, where I did undergraduate research with a professor there, where I worked on just looking at images and seeing can I create sort of images that would be useful for someone that is blind. So that's my first sort of real world project, and it helped me think differently about problems. In class, you're given a lot in case of some toy problems to work on, which is fine because it helps you learn the material. But then this is the first experience where I got to see a problem where it has real world impacts and implications. Where at the time, this is a while ago, it's not recent, where we that wasn't a capability, where everyone wants to be able to use computers, even those that are blind. So how do we make it accessible to them and available to them? So really, this showed me the impact that we can have as engineers, on different sort of problems. And then from there, I navigated around the country to different real world experiences. I had internships at sort of private companies in Delaware, just testing medical devices for testing different conditions from blood samples. Obviously, Dr. Kim said I got great graduate experience working with him as a early researcher on things like artist classification and genre classification for music. And that was a great opportunity for me because it exposed me to, it allowed me to sort of connect things I'm interested in with things I'm good at. I always like signal processing. I thought I was good at it from an engineering perspective, but also had an interest in like music and audio. So working with Dr. Kim allowed me to see that I can connect, when I'm choosing my career, I can connect my interests with things that I like from an academic perspective. Then from there, like Dr. Kim said, I had real world experience in Lockheed Martin in New Jersey, working as a radar signal processing engineer, working with the Navy to sort of test and track different targets in the sky using radar, which was good as well. Just an eye-opening experience in terms of the amount of code that can be written, the sizes of a team that can be put together to work on a problem. And so many different things. And from there, I navigated a lot. From there, I had internships in Silicon Valley, internships in Pittsburgh, did my graduate studies in Columbus, Ohio, and so on. And each one of these experiences, though, I guess the takeaway from this is really taught me something and helped me navigate my career. So I definitely, again, encourage you to seek as many opportunities as you can, especially now. This is the best time almost in your life in terms of figuring out what you want to do time period, because you're able to just decide what you like and don't like and have the freedom to sort of navigate between those more easily. So I definitely encourage you to do that. But okay, you're not necessarily here just to hear that. I also want to discuss some of my research as well and what I've been working on for a while, and then really get some of those as well. So I answer, I guess it's a question in QA. I'll get to that at some point as well. But basic idea is that you should get real world experiences you can get. You should get them by reaching out to faculty members to get sort of see if you can get undergraduate research experience, applying to internships. Look at faculty members both, at Drexel, obviously, starting with those in your department, those maybe outside of your department that want people with your skill sets or a certain set of skills. Look at internships, go to career fairs or virtual career fairs right now and see what companies are hiring that may be of interest to you. But really just look out and see sort of what's available. Just look in the internet and Google it to see what you can what experience you can get involved in. But I think a big part is being assertive and reaching out to those faculty members who may be doing research in the area that you're interested in. All right, so let me get into my talk, and at the end I answer some other questions. And if you have other questions, again, put them in the chat as well, or Q&A as well. And if I see them and it's relevant, I'll try to address it. Otherwise, we'll just wait till the end. So really the goals of this talk, the rest of this talk, is really to talk about some of my work, some of my research, to expose you some of the real world problems that I've been addressing. But really I want to talk about, how we need, the need is to consider people when we're developing these engineering solutions or computer science solutions. So I'll talk about that. Then I'll also talk about some other problems that some of my colleagues here at Indiana University work on that are interesting to you. This is sort of to expose you some of the problems that people are trying to face, at least in academia. And if time permits, we'll talk about industry, but we can also, I guess we have a Q&A at the end. I can answer any questions about that as well. So what do I do? What is my research? So essentially my research is I want to extract the information from signals or from data. I want to extract the information and I want to sort of generate what I call estimates from these signals or data. Now, what is a signal? A signal can be anything. It can be an audio file. It can be a speech signal. It can be an image, a picture, a video. It can be medical records. It can be, your data from your Fitbit. It can be anything, can be sort of information or a signal. And my work mostly concentrates on audio signals and speech signals for most of my work. But I also look and do some work involving sort of medical records as well. So if I did like a pie chart of my work, really there's two main projects that I work on, and they are speech enhancement and another being speech assessment. Those are sort of the biggest sort of projects I work on, but then I look at other things as well, like sort of audio scene analysis, which is about if I'm given an audio signal, can I sort of summarize the environment? Like, am I indoors? Is the person indoors? Are they outdoors? How many people are talking? Sort of what sounds are present in that environment? Is it a bird chirping? Is it a dog, barking? Those sort of things. That's sort of audio scene analysis. I'll briefly talk on audio privacy as well. But some of my other work is in speech recognition, which many of you probably are aware of. It is taking the audio signal and transcribing what is said in the signal. But also I do some work involving human behavior, where we look at how the people respond to certain signals and certain data, and how can we model that with our approaches. So really, though, I want to talk mostly about today speech enhancement and speech assessment. So I'll get into that now. So what is speech enhancement? So I have a basic example of this that I want to play. So imagine, pre-COVID, you're in a restaurant, right? It's a busy restaurant. Maybe you're with your family, with friends, just hanging out. It's a Friday evening. You had a busy week of school. Your parents had a busy week of work or something like that, or you had a busy week of work as well. You just kind of want to relax and unwind and have a conversation with your friend over a good meal. So you can imagine in this scenario, it's noisy, right? There's a lot of people there. A lot of people are talking at the same time. You may have music playing. You have doors opening and closing. You hear dishes clanking, and just generally you hear a lot of noise. Toys scratching, as they move. Chairs scratching as they move. You hear a lot of different sounds. So then, how do you communicate with the person in your group, in your party? Well, oftentimes, if it's loud enough, you don't communicate that well. And why is that? Well, because the noise gets in the way. So I would play a sound example of maybe something that is played in a restaurant. This is a signal of what it may sound like in a busy restaurant.
Breaking the dam almost constant.
Let me play it again.
Breaking the dam almost constant.
Now, did anyone recognize what was said in that audio signal? If you do, can you either type it in the chat or so? I'm just curious to see if anyone can recognize what was said. Breaking it down, Mohammed. Mumbling, Emre, I think. Nope, Cassius said. Yeah, so it's pretty hard. It's pretty difficult for you to understand this. I hear clinking. Let me play it one more time.
Breaking the dam almost constant.
So it's a lot in there, and it's difficult for you to hear what is said. And why is that? Well, that's because there's noise present. It's a lot of noise. I mean, also obviously listening over your computer factors into it. But really, there's noise present. And even if you had headphones on, and maybe if I play this directly in front of you, you still wouldn't hear it. So, but let me actually play the clean speech of this. So this is I generated this signal. Let me play this clean speech version of this signal.
A break in the dam almost caused a flood.
I'll play it one more time.
A break in the dam almost caused a flood.
Now, can you recognize what it said now? If you do, you can type it in the chat. Any guesses as what was said? A break in the dam almost caused a flood, Muhammad said. Yeah, that's what's in here. I think a few others are saying it now as well. So you can clearly see that noise causes a problem. And you're probably already aware of this. This is not groundbreaking news. Noise causes a problem and it inhibits your ability to communicate in noisy environments. So what is speech enhancement? Part of speech enhancement essentially is that we want to remove this unwanted noise. We want to remove this unwanted sounds to help you communicate a little better, and even in noisy environments. So one of the questions my research looks at for this is how can we sort of do that? How can we, if I'm given this noisy audio signal, how can I extract the speech from that so that I can hear what they're saying and potentially communicate with them or someone better? So before I get into how, I want to get into why. Why speech enhancement? Why do we need to do this? I think the first reason why I think this is still an important problem to address is that I still think speech is king. I still think that. And what do I mean when I say that? I mean that speech is still the most effective and efficient way for us to communicate. We may have text, we may have chat, we may have social media, we may have many things, different ways that we can communicate now, emojis and stuff as well. But I still think speech is the best way, mainly because it's clearer, it's less ambiguous. With speech, you don't lose information about context or emphasis when you hear someone speak. So I still think speech is important. Another reason why it's bad, and I think it's evidence now, is that we communicate a lot through our devices. Like we're communicating now through, talking through my laptop. Either you have a laptop or desktop or a cell phone or something we're using to connect to this. So we're communicating through electronic device. And with that, it's important to think about not just these devices, but what other devices are used to help people communicate. And one of the biggest ones are hearing aids. Hearing aids are a big way for people to communicate, especially those that have a hearing impairment. If you have a hearing impairment and noise is present in around you, you really struggle to communicate, even worse than someone without a hearing impairment. Just because you can't pick out the speech, you can't recognize it well. So it's important to enhance speech, not only for sort of us to communicate through devices, but someone with a hearing aid so they can communicate even in less noisy environments. So this is sort of another reason why we want to do speech enhancement. And that's more or less too, is we know noise is always present. We always have noise around us more often than not when we're in public. And also speech enhancement performance to date is not really as good as it needs to be, especially for those with maybe a hearing impairment at the moment. So briefly, then I get into the as my group, my research group, the students I work with, how do we address sort of this speech enhancement problem where when we're given an audio signal, how do we sort of remove the noise and using sort of electrical engineering concepts? So essentially with our work, and I'm not going to get into all the details of this, I want this talk to be high level to you. But essentially, we use different machine learning techniques to remove noise. So the basic idea is that we train different machine learning systems, mainly with deep neural networks. They're given an input, and we train them using a certain set of data to predict the clean version of the signal. That's sort of some things that we do with this, and the how is we use different neural networks. So what we have shown here are essentially three different ways that we developed over the last 4 years or so to do it. These are three totally different ways. The first way is sort of about using deep neural networks to estimate some filter, where if I use this filter, it can remove all the noise, everything that I deem as noise. Other ways, sort of the one in the bottom, sort of looks at sort of adversarial ways to train a deep neural network. So sort of so it gets better performance. And then on the right is a different network sort of we developed to sort of consider how different frequencies of a sound, how they sort of relate, and sort of how can we consider those when we're trying to remove unwanted noise. So these are different machine learning approaches that we use. They also incorporate different signal processing. We had to program these approaches as well in order for them to work. So we're using a lot of different skills that we learned from different courses to really develop these ideas and these approaches. And I have two examples of this. So one example of the original noisy signal, and then I have an example of one of our systems removing the noise. So this is the first example here.
A white silk jacket goes with any shoe.
Does anyone recognize that? I'll play it again.
A white silk jacket goes with any shoe.
And I think Jack said he heard white silk jacket. Anyone else? The white silk jacket goes with any shoes. Good job, Imam. I think I see it. Yeah, I see a couple of you got this one. So okay, this one wasn't as challenging as the other one. I see a lot of you are typing it now. But if I play the clean version, this is after we enhance it with our system. We trained our system with different data. Now we're testing it with this data, and this is one of the outputs that we get.
A white silk jacket goes with any shoes.
Let me play the noisy version first.
A white silk jacket goes with any shoes. A white silk jacket goes with any shoes.
And then I have another example as well.
Light maple makes for a swell room.
That one's a little easier to recognize.
Light maple makes for a swell room.
These are two different signals. I think it's the same speaker, two different signals, two different noises that are applied to them.
Light maple makes for a swell room.
And you can sort of
Light maple makes for a swell
you can
room.
get a sense of what's going on, the sound, how is it, it's improving, it's removing the noise as we want it to. And you know, if you do look at a sort of analysis and statistics from this, if you do this with, you know, a lot of signals, you can sort of conclude that the performance is better than it was before. So in this case here, we're just filtering out different sounds that may or may not be at different frequencies. And I didn't get into the details of that, but essentially we define sort of some scalar value that when we multiply it against the signal, it clearly essentially just removes all the noise. And these noises can be at different frequencies as well. So this is sort of some of the details. I didn't go into it. We can talk about that either offline or at the end of the talk if you have more specific questions. But that's just some of the things that we're doing with this. But one thing that you should have heard is that even though we remove the noise, there's still something off with with the results, where there's some distortions, there's some artifacts, even in some cases light robotic sounding components of the signal that we still want to remove. So this is some of my work I did early on about 4 years ago with these examples. And since then, we're trying to see, well, why is that? Why do we still get these distortions? Why does it still sound unnatural in many ways, even though, you know, deep learning is helping us solve a lot of problems today? So my work going forward is more about what are these problems, why they exist, and can we develop approaches to solve these problems? And some of the ideas I thought about of late, and this is part of my NSF funded awards, these are problems I'm pursuing now currently, is that one reason why we still have some distortions when we generate speech signals is that one is with neural networks and deep neural networks and machine learning and artificial intelligence in general, there are oftentimes we violate certain scientific principles. So these are principles that have been established and well known throughout physics and math and even signal processing that we just sort of violate and don't enforce within our machine learning algorithms or ideas. So those aren't enforced. I think another big reason why we also have distortions is that and the main reason I think we have distortion is that when we're training this system, when we're developing this system, we really do not consider how people perceptually respond to and assess different speech signals. At no point did I have someone listen to this signal while I'm training it to tell me if this was all good enough. I didn't do that at all. So a big part of the problem with this problem, with speech enhancement, I think in general, is that people often are left out of the process. Once you get some experience, you see a lot of times, like you have a lot of training and testing that you do for a different system. You train and test it. You do a lot of it on your own as engineers. And then at the end, once you're satisfied with it, once you pass certain your test or maybe your boss's test, at that point, then you give it to the community to sort of assess and evaluate, maybe some sort of pilot studies. So really, people are left out of the process until the end. And that point is almost kind of too late at that point to really make changes. So part of what I want to do with my research and my work is I want to get people earlier involved into the assessment and training process of these systems. And the first goal towards that is earlier on considering human assessment. So if a person is given a signal, how would they rate that signal? And if they rate their signal a certain way, can I predict how they will rate that signal? So can I make a sort of a model that predicts how a person will rate a signal in terms of like how quality it is? Is it clear and concise? Or is it clear and robotic, or clear unnatural? So in terms of having extra distortions, part of my research is trying to incorporate people into the machine learning development process. So in particular, though, we're talking about speech and with my work, we're talking about assessing speech with my work. So the first thing I want to do is see, can I develop approach? I'm sorry, I went too far. Can I develop approaches where I learn how a person will assess a given speech signal, where the speech signal may or may not have noise or may have noise at different levels? Can I develop data-driven machine learning approaches that can sort of predict that? So I know if Brian gives a rating of 3 for these types of signals, that I can always, predict, I know if I'm given that type of signal, not that necessarily the same instance, that I can sort of predict that Brian would give it a 3. I'm calling some of your names that I see in the chat. But if I can do that correctly. So what do we have to do this? This is sort of a second part of my project, this one with NSF, is where the first part of this project was we need to determine how do people assess different signals. So we did this large crowdsourced listening study online through Amazon Mechanical Turk, where we had roughly 36,000 audio signals with different amounts of noise in it, different types of noise in it, different speakers, in different environments, all, so the signals vary a lot. And we would put a listening study out and ask, different people at different times to listen to the signal and rate the signal in terms of quality on a 100-point scale. So 100 meaning this is the best signal I've ever heard. It's nothing like this signal. 0 meaning this is the worst signal I ever heard. Never play this signal to me again. Just because it's so bad and so unnatural or robotic or distorted. So we had roughly, I think, 3,500 people complete this task, and they would rate the signals. They rated about 15 sets of signals, and in terms of this 100-point scale. Then after we completed this study, we resulted in roughly 180,000 rated signals that we can use and do analysis on, but also we can use for prediction. So this is one of the studies that we did. We're actually doing some more studies as well. And I think I see Darren saying he may have done this study. So thank you, Darren. If you did, thank you for your help. It was something that we definitely needed. So definitely, this was a big part. We're just collecting data, which is a big part of engineering. I think too, and I didn't plan to talk about this, but data collection is often a part that's often forgotten I think in engineering, but in real world problems, especially those involving machine learning and AI, you need to have data. So you had to have the ability to collect it. And I think it's important for us as engineers and computer scientists to get more involved in the data collection process because it's helpful to come up with solutions if you know more about the data itself. Okay, so that being said, then, so we collected this large amount of data. And then our next goal was to be, one, can we sort of, given a signal from this data set, can we sort of train a system to predict sort of a score for a particular, or the average score based on the average score across all participants for a particular signal? And so we did just that, where we generated some results using, first we averaged the scores for each signal into a mean opinion score. And sort of here in this left depiction, you can get a sense of how people rated the scores. We changed the scale. Instead of a 100-point scale, we modified it, dropped it down to a 10-point scale. And we had different types of signals, where one type of signal, they tend to rate higher. Another type of signal, which is more of our noisy signals, they start to rate a little lower. And then there was a signal in between, purposely in between, what they sort of rated in between for a certain data set. So this is just sort of the distribution of the scores for different types of signals. So that was the first thing we wanted to do. But then our ultimate goal, though, is to be able to predict these scores given the signal, and sort of blindly predict these scores. So we're not seeing, we set aside some signals. So some signals we use to train our system. We set aside some other signals to test our system. And we wanted to see, can we predict the mean opinion score for the signals that we test with, even though we didn't train our system with those? And we developed a neural network approach using different types of neural networks. I don't know what you're familiar with at this point. Probably this maybe from your own studies. Maybe you may have heard of things like recurrent neural networks or attention mechanisms and those sort of things. So we incorporate some of those components into our systems, and we're able to predict sort of the mean opinion score of a given test signal. And so that the bottom right graph sort of shows a depiction of our results, where the x-axis, we see the true mean opinion score. So this is a score that was given by the user. And the left axis, we sort of see what their predicted MOS score is. And you can sort of see like a straight trend here, which is indicative of us being able to reasonably predict the mean opinion score of a particular signal. So this is what my work has been to date, but we're not done yet. There's still things we have to consider. One of that is we need to consider is that how do we use these assessments to improve speech enhancement? That's sort of ongoing work that my students and I are pursuing. We're also looking at how do we ensure that our sound is realistic. We still want to answer that question. We still want to answer, how can we make it sort of scientifically valid by incorporating sort of scientific principles. But often we need to, we still need to make sure it works in different environments for different users before we're sort of satisfied with the approach. And I think the last sort of question that we're really pursuing at this, because ultimately we want to put this in something like a hearing aid, is that how can we make it so that it works on a small sort of device without the internet and in real time? So those are some problems that we're considering for this. So I think we have less than 10 minutes for this class. So I want to get into some other things as well. There's some other work I'm doing as well with privacy and audio as it relates to sort of some of these devices that we now have in our homes. So many of you have cell phones. I'm pretty sure all of you probably have a cell phone, and at least some of you have like Google Home Assistants and Amazon Echoes. So part of my research I want to pursue now is that how can we ensure privacy with our audio and speech if we have these devices in our home? So how can we be assured that the device is not eavesdropping on our conversations, either through the manufacturer or maybe some hacker? How can we ensure that we're not being compromised in some way? We know from computer vision, you can do something simple. You can just put something over your camera to block someone from seeing your video, but how can we do that sort of from an audio perspective? So this is something I'm also currently pursuing as well, a different project. So I just want to spend the next few minutes quickly going over some other projects, other ECE problems and applications of real world problems that people are addressing, not just speech and audio, but other ones as well. So this problem here is one of my colleagues, David Crandall, and his students are worked on a few years ago, where essentially the idea was, if they're given a bunch of images, like 100,000 images off the internet, off social media, from maybe people visiting an important landmark, can they reconstruct sort of a 3D representation of that landmark from those two-dimensional images? So what you see here is part of their work where they had images of the Colosseum in Rome, and these are just 2D images that anyone would take, and they're trying to reconstruct sort of Rome and the Colosseum and other sort of aspects of that from those images. So this is an interesting problem. You can see that it reconstructs it well, but there also are some gaps, so there's still some room for improvement. Some other problems I know people are addressing within David Crandall's group is this sort of vehicle localization and event prediction, where if you have cameras and you have cameras in your car, can you reasonably predict the location of vehicles, but also can you predict maybe if an accident's about to occur? So this is some work he's been doing there as well, where if you look at this, you can see that they have boxes to indicate the different vehicles, and you sort of saw like a flashing red in there to indicate that an accident is about to happen. And they've been working on this system recently, but this is some of their early work that they developed. Then other than that, there's been some work as well with drones and getting drones to collaboratively work together and communicate. There's a lot of military application for this in industry. I know, speaking firsthand with some companies in the defense sector now they're really interested in this sort of solution to these problems, where you get a device or drone or anything else to work collaboratively, but also to work collaboratively with people. So this is some of that work that's available. And for the sake of time, though, I had some other ones. I'm not going to get into detail with them. There's also things with privacy with images. There are things about how to generate advertisements for you from your likes and dislikes on social media. So not actually generating products based on what you like and dislike. I know there's researchers here that had ties with Baidu Research that's been working on that. I mean, whether you like this idea or not, that's different. I know people are working on that as well. So I'm going to, I guess, get to my conclusion now. There's some other problems. If I had time, I would have talked about. There's also some problems in industry, obviously, they're aware of. You may be aware of. One of that is ethics, fair, and unbiased. No, unbiased in AI. I know Dr. Kim mentioned that that things we're not just isolated engineers. As engineers, we have to be aware of how our work impacts others, and part of that is ensuring that what we develop works for everybody. And we want it to work for everybody, regardless of how they look or how they speak, how they sound, how they hear. We want it to work for them, and part of interest in the industry is ethics, fairness, and being unbiased with our AI and machine learning as well. So, in summary, and after this, I got to open up the question. I encourage you to get as many opportunities as you can in different fields. There's a lot of interest and research that's out there and work that's being done, both in industry and academia. So, I definitely encourage you to pursue those, as you go throughout your career. Okay, so I'll stop here. Thank you for everyone for here, and thank you to my students to help with this work.
Woo! Thank you, Professor Williamson. We do have a few minutes, so please feel free to put some questions in the Q&A there. I'll just start real quick because you mentioned this at the end. I mean, a lot of people think, oh yeah, it's a machine, which is just a network. It doesn't have biases.
Mm-hmm.
How does that relate to doing machine learning in an ethical and unbiased way?
See, a lot of it's not just a machine. A lot of it is the data that you use to train the machine. And if you're not careful with the data you select, you're going to learn unintended things. Things you don't necessarily want to do. It's going to be unintended correlations. So you have to make sure that your data really, when you're talking about machine learning and AI, you have to make sure your data is representative of everyone. I think if from a speech recognition perspective, I just don't want it to work for those that are native English speakers. I want it to work for those that maybe English is their second language. So if I'm training the system, I need to make sure I have that data available to me.
Yeah. So there's a great follow-up question here. What kinds of data did you have to collect for your research?
This is funny. Dr. Kim, I remember early on working with you with some work. I remember like having to label like data a lot, which is very, very tedious task. And I think that may be why some people avoid it. But I had to label like music data. I think label like artists and genres. I've labeled speech and audio data, obviously, with like actually I'm labeling some data now with like transcriptions. I had to listen to signals and label them. At least some of my students are doing that. So mostly a lot of speech and audio data and some medical record data as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because yes, I mean, it's easy for us to say kids these days because, they have it so easy. There's all this data now that they have access to. But yeah, at some point, you will have to probably label some data on your own. It is not fun. There are tools like you mentioned with Mechanical Turk where you can try to pay people, on a large scale to do that. And I think some of our students have actually participated in that. That's fantastic. But yeah, getting good data is really hard. Right, and labeling it at the scales that you need for machine learning is also, I'm sure, has been your experience too. It's been really hard. Okay, another good question coming in here. Switching gears about your work at Lockheed Martin and with the Navy. Can you go into a little bit more depth about projects you did during the time there? I guess nothing classified, right? You can't talk about it.
Yeah, nothing's classified. I mean, I worked on classified projects there, but I mean, it's been so long. At least with Lockheed Martin, I don't remember all the details, the classified details. But mostly with Lockheed Martin, my work was with the Navy. So I worked on radar as a radar signal processing engineer. I did both programming. I did like system engineering, where I had to define the systems, and the applications varied. Some of the applications were about making it easier for the warfighter, presenting them with a concise amount of information that they need to do their jobs, developing different like interfaces and GUIs to do that. Another part was actually detecting, using radar to detect different objects and their precise location, which is this is probably I've never seen so much code when I did that, worked on that project. It's just such a big project where we had thousands of engineers working on that. So I did some, work with that. More recently now, I'm trying to collaborate with different naval groups here in Indiana. One of the projects I'm really interested in is using sort of sound to detect a location of drones, and more than one drone. So it's certain sound frequencies you can look at to sort of detect them, but that's sort of what I'm working on now.
Yeah. Okay, here, I'll take the student questions real quick. And by the way, we're almost at the end of the class period. I understand if you're, for students, if you have another class that you need to go to, totally understand. But thank you. Don't forget the surveys, right? You got to do the survey. I should have reinforced this. You got to do the survey every week, and you should get an email receipt. If you don't get that email receipt, make sure you get in touch with me, because then I don't have a record of your survey. But yeah, for those of you who have to leave, let's thank our speaker one more time, because what a fantastic presentation. So
Thank you.
yeah. Let's see, questions. So we'll do a little bit of post show here. Now, out of curiosity, what are your views on the ethics of the use of autonomous weapons in warfare?
Well, I think this is where the ethics comes in with AI and machine learning. I don't think we can blindly allow machines. This is just my opinion. To respond to something that deemed as a threat, and mostly because at this point is being autonomous. We can't necessarily trust the machine yet. Because part of it, and I didn't mention this, is about with AI machine learning, it's not really explainable yet. Whereas I don't know why it makes a certain decision as a human. I don't know why it made a decision, and the AI system can't clearly tell me why it made a decision. So we can't, at least, especially at this point, trust the system to make its decisions on its own, especially when it's life or death involved. And that's true not just for warfare. I think that's true for autonomous vehicles. We have to be at the point where we can know why the system made a decision in order to sort of gain trust in that. And then we also have to be able to verify that the system's going to work correctly. And we can't really do that yet. So I think at this point, I think it's something that we shouldn't do from an ethics perspective for ethics reasons, and also just because it's not possible at this point. It's not realistic at this point, at least from my opinion.
Yeah, it's such a weird point in history that we're in, right? There's so
Mhm.
much power in machine learning, in deep learning, right? They can do things that, probably back when I was an early faculty member and you were a grad student, we didn't think
Mhm.
that, we would have, 99.9% speech recognition accuracy, right? In
Yeah.
noisy environments. Yeah, that's kind of a pipe dream. And now, there's so much power there. But yeah, through deep networks, you can do these things, but that explainability aspect is missing. It really is kind of just this black box kind of system. You train it, it does a thing, but you don't know why it came to a certain result.
Mhm.
And I think, that's why, I'm just sort of pontificating for our students here. There is all this open area for research about how do you figure out why is the machine making the decision the way it does, right? Obviously, enormous implications if you're talking about a military situation, but even with speech recognition, object recognition, certainly driverless cars, right? You want to know, why did the car decide to do this versus this?
Mhm.
And we can't always go back and figure that out. Yeah. Survey link. It's still there. Okay, there's the survey link. All right, we are definitely in the post show now. So again, for those of you who want to hang out for a few minutes and maybe ask a few more questions, you are welcome to. This is sort of like that period after class where some of the students hang out, but and so they can see us. So it's not just and then of course people will be heading off to their other classes and things soon. Um, one question, sorry, I sort of answered it offline, but maybe you can back me up. Is coding a big part of electrical engineering?
It can be depending on what path you take. For me, it was. I mean, I just, signal processing was my area. Now, I worked for Dr. Kim in signal processing. I worked when I was at University of Delaware. I did signal processing, and one of my first tasks was to program in MATLAB or mostly in MATLAB. I don't think I programmed anything else back then. Was to program. So for signal processing, yeah, I think you end up programming, but if you do other areas of ECE, or you may not have to program. I know I work with colleagues at Lockheed Martin. They were in sort of circuits or other things, and they didn't program. They did design. They did circuit design, and they did testing and those sort of things. So it really depends on what path you take as an engineer.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just add that, particularly in machine learning AI areas, you probably will have to do some coding there, right? And
Yeah,
those are sort of the hot areas right now. Um, I
I
suppose,
think it's expected.
yeah, it's hard to do anything without coding in those areas. Uh, cool. All right, I was going to ask a question just because I'm curious. I mean, when you graduated from Drexel, you went to Lockheed, you went to industry, and I'm just curious, but then you ended up coming back to academia, right? You ended up getting a PhD, and I'm just curious what what made you decide to go back to academia? Because Lockheed's a great place, and obviously a lot of things that people do at Lockheed. What made you go back to being a poor professor?
So yeah, well, I think in a nutshell, really, it's just about freedom, academic freedom, project freedom, the ability to work on projects that are really most interested in, and sort of lead and drive those projects. That was the main reason why I went back to academia. Dr. Kim, you remember when I first came to Drexel, I was a PhD student. Then I switched to a master's student just because I wasn't really, at that point, I really wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life. Like, do I want to be in academia or do I want to work in industry? So I wasn't sure, but I thought at that point though I needed a break. So I went to industry and I worked there. It was good that I got that break. I needed it. I worked on some interesting projects. I had a lot of good teammates. People really helped me out a lot. So I enjoyed the projects. I enjoyed the teammates, but I really, at the end of the day, I had interest that I wanted to explore full time, and those research interests, and so I knew I needed to go back to academia. But then also too, I realized too that I enjoy working with students. I want to help students come out. I think, and Dr. Kim, you did a lot of this. You did a lot of outreach when I was there over the summer and throughout the year, and I wanted that to be a part of my daily life, or my daily or weekly or regular part of my life. So I knew I had to go back to academia just so I can have research that I want to do, but also make the impact on hopefully young students as I wanted to. So those are two reasons why I knew I had to go back to get my PhD so I can be a professor, and sort of, chart my own path, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you knew this about me. So I did my master's, and then I worked in Silicon Valley for about 2 years before going back for a PhD. So what I always tell students, in case anybody's still listening there, if you really want to do this, yeah, to do a PhD, you have to really, really want to do it. Right. You have to really love it, because there will be so many obstacles along there. There'll be so many reasons you don't want to finish. Right?
Yeah.
Because all your friends are like getting paid a lot more, and they're driving fancy cars and nice apartments, and and then you're toiling along for whatever it was, like $2,000 a month, or maybe less, which may not sound like a lot, but it's not very much if you're trying to live in Philadelphia. So you have to really love it, right? And so, and I think a lot of people do go to industry or get some kind of other experience just to kind of gain that perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I actually, this is cool, but I actually think I want to do something of my own design. I want to have that research control, right?
Yeah. And I think too, for me, like I have a lot of interest. I found for me, the industry, I was, you're working on one project and you're working on it, 40 hours a week for however many weeks. But I had so many interests. So I wanted to work on a lot of projects. So I think, again, in terms of the freedom, being in academia, this allowed me to pursue all those interests at the same time.
All right, 2 more questions came in. Let's see if we can tackle these. Let's see. Right now, there are algorithms that can generate classical music and sort out court files in a fraction of the time people can. Every day, machines are slowly replacing people's work. Do you think there'll be an unemployment spike in the future because machines are replacing people's jobs? Oh, you can take first crack at that one.
Yeah, you go ahead first. I'll let you go first.
No, you should go first.
Oh, you said I should go. Oh, okay.
Yeah, you should go first.
This is what, are machines going to replace people? I'm answering, but I'm not really answering it. But I think it's going to be both. I think you're going to be honest, there'll be some instances where people may be replaced with machines, but I think in some instances they're not going to be replaced at the same time. And things would change. So for instance, we know some in the auto industry, some people were replaced with robots. Partially, I think. I'm not an expert in that area, but I think that happens somewhat. But I think other times where we thought machines are going to replace like everyone in supermarkets. I mean, we still haven't done that yet. We're not there yet. Even though everyone has a sort of self checkout machine, there's still a lot of people working in supermarkets and doing different things. So um, I don't think we're at the point where we're going to replace a lot of people, mainly because I don't think that machines are really intelligent just yet. I think there's so many things that machines and computers can't do, where we're not at that point where they can replace people. But I also see this as an opportunity because I think this means that with this, we need more engineers, we need more programmers, we need more technicians. We'll need more people to sort of this maintenance work and to set them up and to make sure they're working. We need more customer service. We'll need sort of they'll still create jobs. I don't necessarily they're going to end jobs, but jobs will more or less change maybe to something else. So I guess that's my hand wavy way of answering the question. I don't know, Dr. Kim, you have anything to add to that?
Usually I have
Or
two
dispute?
answers to this, which the one is yes, because that's always happened throughout history. Of course, new technology
Mhm.
does take the place of human jobs, but and it's really about the pace of that, right? We look at the Industrial Revolution. That was a great thing, right, for the society. Yeah, it really sucked for a lot of people, right? The Industrial Revolution, because
Yeah.
there was massive worker displacement. And that's when you start to get labor movements and better laws around job security, and and unions started to form. Um, but in today's modern age, I think we need to pay a lot more attention, as engineers when we create technologies, right? Is it actually empowering people, right? One of the reasons I work in music is because music and technology have always been interlinked, and the technology allows people to do things that they couldn't do previously, right? Whether it's as a
Mhm.
composer or as an artist, I can make music in different ways, right? Right now, like, you don't need a recording studio, right? If you're an aspiring artist, you can record an awesome album in your bedroom with your phone, right? And that's never been possible before. So that's going to enable a lot more artists to record their stuff and get their content out there, right? Um, does it maybe take away some jobs from recording studio engineers? Yeah, it probably will. So the balance has to be: are you empowering more artists and creating more opportunities for that than the jobs that you're taking away, right? But it's a fine balance, and I think that we are, as a field of engineering or in computer science, we're only starting to really be aware of those broader implications, right? Because there's just been so much emphasis on just more technology, better machines, be able to scale, all those things. And that ethics piece that you mentioned, has unfortunately not been a prominent part of education, of CS and engineering education in the past.
Mhm.
Yeah. What was he? Didn't the Industrial Revolution create more jobs than destroy? Eventually, yes, it did, but not right away, right? So eventually, so if you're willing to wait, decades, then we're fine. But tell that to somebody who's lost their job because their factory's been automated, right? So I do think we need to achieve a better balance there. All right, last thing, and then we should really wrap this up. There are a few people hanging out still. I'm surprised.
Yeah. Okay.
And sorry to keep you a little bit long here.
It's fine. It's fine. I have time.
Yeah, regarding the bit about the lack of explainability in AI, is it not as simple as monkey see, monkey do? That's the expression. I thought that was the whole idea behind AI. Do you want to try to take that one? This
Like,
will
I'm
be our
not
last
sure.
one.
I say I'm not sure what the phrase means, but I think it's like explainability. What I'm saying is that me as either developer of machine learning or as a user of machine learning, I need to know how and why the machine is making this decision. Like for instance, if if you decide, I don't know, you're doing your job, I can go ask you, okay, why did you make this step? Why did you design it this way? I can get feedback into why you made the decision, which we can't get from our machines yet. Like as Dr. Kim said, we just let them do what they do. We give it an input, they produce an output, But we can't, at least with deep learning especially, we can't sort of understand how or why it made a decision. So like, for instance, if it wants, if it says this signal is high in quality, well, why did it say it's high in quality? Did it look at all the frequencies? Did it look at, see that there's these frequencies look more like speech than noise? Why did it say those decisions or make the decision? We can't do that just yet. So when I talk about explainability, I'm really talking about, can we sort of take the cover off the system and really see why and how it made this decision. But until we get to that point, I think we're not going to see machine learning and AI in certain problems, just because that's going to be needed, especially for military, who's very slow to adapt to change. It's going to take a while before we see machine learning AI solutions for those problems.
Yeah, I think you stated it very well. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll wrap this up. We'll close down the webinar. And unfortunately, I can't do it. I can't just like kick the I can't kick the attendees out or anything, so that they can just still see us. But I just wanted to say thanks again. This is fantastic. This is just perfect for our audience, and really appreciate you taking the time to do this.